Our featured guest tonight is a true rising star director in the action film world. Though to call him a rising star truly doesn't do him justice. His work in stunts is prolific and has led him to work with some of the best and brightest over the past 3 decades, and on some of the biggest films to grace the silver screen in that time period. His new film, One Ranger, starring Thomas Jane, hit theaters this month. And here to chat about it all is the man himself, the wonderful Jesse V. Johnson. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. How are you? Very happy to be here.
So you've had such an exciting career spanning different roles all across the film business. But if I'm correct, looking at your CV, you started as a third AD. How did you get into the film industry, and what events led up to your job on Nightbreed?
On Nightbreed, I started actually a little before that. I was a runner. Yeah, a third AD, I guess. You know, a third AD is a union position. So I was a non-union set PA who is someone who basically makes cups of coffee. And I learned very, very quickly that the best way to get out of that was by making bad coffee. So that you didn't get asked to make coffee again, and you got shunted to another position or job or requirement, and were able to learn something a little more interesting. But yeah, my family were in the business. My grandfather provided horses for movies, Ryan's Daughter and Jabberwocky and Monty Python and that sort of thing. And then they had a film that came in that wanted a particularly aggressive horse, and my uncle, who was the only person that could ride it at the time, was chosen to ride it, and he doubled Sophia Loren, and so he got into the business. He's since become one of the top sort of second unit directors and stunt coordinators in the game. Has won an Oscar and a Lifetime Achievement Award from BAFTA, and that's Vic Armstrong. So he was doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I was still at high school. I would have been 14 or 15 years old, and I'd visited the set a lot of times. I knew that I loved movies. I loved the process of making films, the smell of the glue that they use for the fiberglass when you get to Pinewood Studios, or something that I still smell it. And it reminds me of those early days of visiting the set and being on set. But I said, I'll do anything. And he came from the generation where people left school at 14 or 15. So I don't think it was a huge sort of thing for him. And I went off and I carried his stunt bags on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Initially, I think I had to go back to school and take some of those, pesky exams that you have to take, and then came back out again and got a job as a PA. I did a film called Getting It Right with John Gielgud and Peter Cook, and then went from that to Nightbreed.
What eventually drew you to action films specifically? It's such an interesting genre in multiple respects, with its own unique cinematic language and style.
Right. Early on, it was as an assistant director, I was being hired in the US primarily for films, and I'll get to your question, that had large extras numbers. So they called me for Shawshank Redemption, which had between 400 and 2,500 extras. How to Make an American Quilt, which was at a high school. So I think 200-300 extras. Mr. Holland's Opus, which was, we shot through the summer in Portland, Oregon at a high school. Again, it's 200 to 300 extras. The Birdcage, which was Robin Williams' picture, again, with sort of 150 to 75 per day of sort of cross-dressing dancers, which was quite fun, and extras, people watching. And so I began to get myself sort of a name for being able to direct large numbers of extras in the background, and love doing it, and be there and really get myself busy with getting the guys in through makeup and wardrobe and hair. But it's a very, very hard job. You're there from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And I also, part of that particular position on a film set is signing the stuntmen in and out on what's called the Exhibit G, which is their SAG paperwork, their union paperwork. And on that, I would see what they were making for their overtime and their stunt adjustment, which is the extra bump you get if you do an actual stunt. And so after doing that a few times, and you're realizing they're making more in a day than you were making in a week or two, I began to sort of think that maybe I was chasing the wrong chalice. Most assistant directors tend to become producers anyway. It's a misnomer to say an assistant director, because really they're an assistant to the producer and the production manager, and it's a clerical position in many ways. There's a little bit of artistry in it when you're doing the background, but beyond that, it's watching the numbers, watching the hours, making sure the actors are going through the various different steps to get ready to to film. And so I was becoming a little frustrated with it anyway. I had trained in martial arts and motorcycles and horses and all that kind of stuff in the UK, because that was where my family were specializing stunts and action. So in the US, it became it was a little bit of a transition. It took about 6 months to a year to really get the SAG card and get started. But stunts was where I really sort of felt at home. It was closer to directing than assistant directing was. You were taking actors and you were winning their confidence, and you were talking to them on a one-on-one basis. So all of that fear that you might have of a famous actor goes away, and you start talking to them as a normal person and realizing they have fears, neurosis, and paranoia, just like anyone else does, and you're calming them down, allowing them to have faith in you, in that they're going to be safe or not burnt or wrecked in a car wreck or have a horse fall on them. So that was really great practice for learning to instill confidence in an actor that you have on a set, where your challenge is merely dramatic. So I actually found it very stimulating and a lot closer to directing. So it served a really good intro, and I did that for quite a few years. It pays very, very well. You travel an awful lot, and to be honest, everyone's timing is different. And when you look back, you go, "Oh, that was perfect," because I got to work with Kenneth Branagh, with P.T. Anderson, with James Cameron, with Spielberg, and I got to watch them. At the time, I was chomping at the bit, wanting to direct my own movies, wanting to get out there. But you look back and you realize that was possibly one of the greatest training grounds imaginable, short of an incredible film school that could afford to have those kind of people come in and give lectures, which is, when you're sitting next to the monitor with one of those directors and you're watching their process, listening to it day in, day out, it's unreal. You have to open yourself up to learn, because obviously you're supposed to be focused on a particular job, and you can't be geeking out and sort of becoming a nerd and asking questions. That's not the place or the time to do that. But you're watching respectfully, and it's a fabulous learning ground. Really, really good. I had a chance to direct a couple of low budget features when I worked with some of those bigger ones, and I realized, oh my God, I've literally been doing this wrong. They are far more loyal to the process of making the character correct, to making the script correct, than they are to keeping the budget on schedule or anything. I think that's all lesser. That doesn't matter. And it's not because they have a lot of money, but it's just not a priority. Whereas I came from the school of second unit direction and action directing, where everything is about getting the most setups and doing it in the minimum amount of time. And it's not really very creative. And so it was a really eye-opening sort of experience for me to work with those guys.
What technically classifies something as a true action film in your mind? I mean, lots of movies have actions, explosions, etc., but that doesn't necessarily make them action films, right?
I don't know. I don't think of them as action films. I try and find something else in there. There has to be a motivator beyond the action. It's not just the action sequences. What happens is I find a script that I love. I find characters in that in a scenario that I want to be involved with for a year and a half, the time that it takes to gestate, start, develop, shoot, and then finish and deliver a film. I have to be in love with them for a year and a half. That's quite a long amount of time. So I have to love those characters. I have to love the script, mainly the characters. And then I sit down, and once things are starting to bubble and go, then I look at the action sequences within that, and we develop them the best that we possibly can, and we make them big or small and violent, or we think very, with my team, we work on all of that, and we work out what we can do. But very, very rarely, in fact, for me, never have I been attracted to a script simply because of the action or because it is this. That's not how it works for me. I don't know how to work that way. For me, it's just about the characters and who I'm working with, whether he's a Irish Republican terrorist on the run in Indochina in 1950, or in this case a fisher, a Texas Ranger who's sent to London, or a English mobster looking for redemption, amongst his old cohorts. I'm drawn to the characters that I can hang the action scenes on. And they are secondary. They have to be secondary, always. If you ask people what their favorite action film is, or their action sequences, they'll describe films to you, which are invariably beautifully made films with great characters. In the old days, when you asked anyone what was your favorite car chase, they say, oh, Bullet, of course. You realize in Bullet, you're waiting 45 minutes for that car chase, 45 minutes of character development, story development, people talking, silences, beautiful 60s music, a party scene with Steve McQueen and his girlfriend that goes on interminably where they're playing the flute. And then finally, you have this incredible car chase, which is great. It's wonderful, but it's 8 or 11, 8 minutes long. It's not very, it's you've had to wait for that. The same with Fight Club. It's only recently that we've done these films where there's it's nonstop. 5 to 6 minutes. There's action happening. The greats, the ones that I truly consider the great marks of cinema. You were even, were balanced out with these beautiful stories with characters like John Wayne, Howard Hawks' pictures, or John Ford's poetry, and then you'd have your action sequence. And of course you loved it because you loved the characters that you were watching.